Welcome back once again to the Fantasy Ball Profits. This is our week 3 start sit video. So we're going to hopefully give you guys good advice that you can help make the right decision. You can have a very good team and still leave points on your bench and lose games. Nothing more frustrating than having a good team and then losing because a guy that you didn't start. So anyways, when we give you guys information here, what we really try to do is we look at reports, stats, trends, news, things like that, analytics. We really try to stay away from hunches or feelings. There will always be an anomaly, especially early in a season when you're trying to establish rankings. Things are kind of sorting themselves out. I've always said, and I believe this really passionately, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks into a new season before you can really lock down, for example, defense and offensive rankings. Prime example of anomaly last week that might turn out to be a trend is Andy Dalton. A lot of people said sit Andy Dalton. I said that too because he did good week 1, but he's playing a Baltimore Ravens defense that's very good. And so what do we do with all that? Well, we kind of advise sitting unless you're in a really, really deep league or if a 2-team quarterback league. He goes out there and has a good week against the Ravens. So now we're starting to wonder, is it a better offensive coordinator, offensive line improvements? Maybe he's a guy that you can look at. But last week, we weren't the only ones. If you look at Yahoo rankings, who use Fantasy Pros, which is an cumulative of about 20 to 30 different fantasy experts, their cumulative rankings had him as a 22nd quarterback ranking. So I think he surprised a lot of people. There will always be an anomaly. There will always be that one exception or that guy that kind of bucks the trends. But we try to stick to facts, not hunches. This week we have no Ryan, no Christian here. Christian, of course, is doing our daily fantasy videos. And Ryan should be joining us next week as we do it again. Now, as well, I take a moment to shout out to our Patreon supporters. Thank you guys for your support. We appreciate that so much. If I get the names wrong, forgive me, but I want to say shout out there to Chris Gannon, Alfredo Martinez, Justin O'Connor, Stan Fletcher, and Jeffrey Langan, I think it is. If I get that wrong, once again, forgive me. I appreciate your support. In fact, your support is going to probably help us work out some technical issues we have. We've been having with the mic all week, so thank you once again for your guys' support. We just want to continue to improve our product for you guys. When we give you this information, it's important, and there's so many factors out there. Every league is different. You look at bench size, scoring, options, things like that. So you need to contextualize information. I don't know your bench size, waiver-wire availability. And sometimes when we say sit a player, if you don't have a guy in the bench, but there's somebody not out there, if you're in a deep league, sit may mean that you just need to lower your expectations. And I know last week we kind of said that AJ Green was a wide receiver 2. Typically we'd say, hey, this guy's talented, he's a wide receiver 1. But just because we load him to wide receiver 2, we still advise starting him. And I hope that a lot of you did that. Of course, we know he had a good week. And so another thing we're going to put out there before we actually get into the video is we really try to do the best we can to answer specific questions on the bottom of the video. But the questions come in last year. There are times where we had, a few hundred questions. We can't get to them all. We'll do their best. But if you're a Patreon subscriber or a Patreon supporter, we're going to give you preference. We're going to make sure to give you a deeper breakdown on why we believe what we believe and why we got to that conviction of the advice that we gave you. So, and the final point before I get into our first game is if we don't mention a name here, then you can just safely assume to sit that guy. So let's get right into the first game. Hope you guys are having a good year. Hope you're doing well. Hope your teams are 2-0. But even if it's not, if you're 0-2, don't give up. You can turn it around very quickly. So the first game we want to get to is the Jets and the Browns. Let's get to the quarterback, Tyrod Taylor. He's not a top 15 start, but in deeper leagues, he's serviceable. He's playing a Jets defense that is not great, but it's actually fairly solid. Now, if you look at Tyrod Taylor, once again, he's not tearing up throwing the ball, but the one thing that keeps him always relevant and why he's always dangerous out there is his legs. He's got 100 rushing yards and a touchdown in 2 weeks. So I think he's a guy that if you're in a deeper league, if you're in a 2-quarterback league, good start, but he's outside the top 15 this week. Another one is Sam Darnold. He came out week 1, looked really good, but we laid out in a video right after the draft this year why it's really hard to trust rookie quarterbacks. Typically, historically in the NFL, rookie quarterbacks haven't made good fantasy quarterbacks. There's only been a few, and they're all running quarterbacks. For example, Cam Newton, Wilson, RG3, and Sam Darnold, just not that type of quarterback. He came down to earth somewhat this year, although he did have, or this game, but he had 300 yards passing, but he did throw 2 interceptions. I think his good week 1 was probably more an indication of just how bad the Lions defense is this year. Now he's playing the Browns. Now the Browns have a lot of issues. As you know, the Browns, they find ways to lose games. Doesn't matter what they do. I feel terrible for that organization. But one of the strengths that they have is that defense actually isn't too bad this year. They've actually slowed down Breeze and Ben Roethlisberger. And so I would definitely sit Sam Darnold this week. Now, if you look at Carson Wentz back when he was a rookie, his first 4 games he tore it up, and then the last 12 games, teams got some film there, they made some adjustments, and he struggled down the stretch. And so once again, he may turn out to have a decent year. He may be a great quarterback in the NFL, but I wouldn't trust him yet, so I would stay away from Sam Darnold. Let's get to the running backs. Once again, the Jets have a solid defense. Not great, but they're solid. So Carlos Hyde. His yards per carry haven't been good at this point, but he's a clear-cut lead back, which is wonderful. In fantasy, sometimes that's half the battle, just find that running back that you know is going to get the carries. And he's got touchdowns in back-to-back games. So I think he's a worth a start and a low-end running back, too, I would play him. And I think the yards per carry is going to improve there. I would sit Nick Chubb. He's got 5 carries in 2 games. He's not even worth considering. Maybe he's a stash in a dynasty league, but even then, I'm not sure. I'd probably keep him out there on waiver wire, and if you see something from him, you could pick him up later. Duke Johnson. Duke Johnson, normally we would say he's a decent play in PPRs as a running back 3 or flex play, deeper leagues. But he's only got 3 catches on 8 targets for the year, and so for whatever reason, he's not getting highly involved in the passing game. Now, we think that's going to change, obviously, at some point, but until that trend changes, until he's getting more active in the passing game, I would sit Duke Johnson. Then Isaiah Crowell had a great week 1, took a step back a little bit last year, but unless you're Gurley or Kamara, every running back is going to have ebbs and flows, and they're going to have weeks that they struggle. Isaiah Crowell has outcarried and outperformed Powell in the running game by far. You look at Powell last week, had 5 carries for 6 yards. We started at the beginning of the year, we said Crowell is going to be the starting back there. He's going to get a majority of the carries. He's going to end up with 1,000 yards. I stick to that conviction. We also said that Powell is going to settle in that role as a third down back and out there in passing situations. So I would start Crowell in as a low-end running back 2 in 12-team leagues or larger. The Browns have a solid defense, but they are susceptible to the run. That's the one area where they're a little bit susceptible. You look at Powell. We talked about his role in the passing game. Sure enough, last week, 5 carries, 6 yards, very ineffective. But he did have 5 catches for 74 yards and a TD. So you can start him in deeper leagues if they are PPR. I'd start him in DPR, PPR leagues as a flex play. As far as wide receivers go, you got Jarvis Landry. He missed Monday's practice. Sounds like he had a knee issue, but sounds like he's going to be fine. It's just some preventive maintenance for a veteran guy that's been in the league. This guy's a target hog, 22 targets in 2 weeks. Now with Gordon gone there, he's the number 1 wide receiver. You need to start this guy as a wide receiver 2 in PPRs. He's a wide receiver 3 in standards. Now you have Callaway for the Browns. He's a guy that immediately got bumped up there. Josh Gordon gets traded to the Patriots. We'll talk about that later in the video. Anyways, he's a guy that's on the depth chart sitting as number 3, but the reality is he's going to be the number 2 guy there. He actually looked good this week at 3 catches, around 80 yards and a touchdown. He needs to be owned in all leagues, but I would sit him until his sample of work is bigger and we know exactly what he's going to do in the league. So he's a guy that needs to be owned, but he's not a guy that I would start. Then there's Robbie Anderson. I like Robbie Anderson. I think he's got a lot of talent. Last year, this guy exploded. It's concerning that he has only 4 catches in 2 weeks. He's very talented, but the rookie quarterback maybe not looking his way. It seemed to me like the rookie quarterback prefers to throw the ball to Quincy Enunwa. He's number 1 guy that he's looking towards. Robbie Anderson's too talented to give up on at this point, so I would say he's a wide receiver 3, 4, depending on your league size. Quincy Enunwa is back now. Obviously, this guy's fully recovered after missing last year. 13 catches, 155 yards, and 21 targets in 2 weeks. This guy looks really good. We did a video on him earlier this year on a sleeper pick and talk about some analytics and how the 1 year that he really excelled there, his numbers are actually much better than we realize if you take some deeper analytics into account. This guy is very solid, and he's back. I would start him as a wide receiver 3. As far as tight ends go, you got David Njoku. So he's gotten 14 targets in 2 weeks. That's really good for a tight end, but he's got low production, only 7 catches for 33 yards. I would start him, but he's outside the top 10 to 12 for tight ends until that increases. I would say the Jets tight ends. As far as defense go, the Browns are worth a start in daily or as a weekly matchup plug and play this week, but they're a lower end defensive start, but they're not bad. The Jets are playing Tyrod Taylor, who's been sacked 10 times in 2 games. They're a decent play, but they're not a great play. So both of those defenses you could start, but I'd probably stay away from. As far as kickers go, Cleveland signed a new kicker. I would just stay away from that situation until we see what this guy's going to do. Myers, kicker for the Jets. He's an okay play, but I'd probably look elsewhere if you could. Let's get to the Saints and Falcons. Drew Brees. So Cam Newton usually doesn't put up gaudy passing numbers. Typically doesn't. Cam Newton strengthens his legs. But last week against the Falcons, he had a huge passing day. Now he's going to play Brees. Obviously, you can start Drew Brees. The guy's doing great there. He looks as good as ever. You got to start Drew Brees in this game. That's kind of a no-brainer. Matt Ryan. New Orleans defense started, they struggled early last year, and then after week 4, they kind of picked it up, played really good down the stretch, came into this year, and this defense has taken a step backwards. You look at Tyrod Taylor, had a decent game, and Fitzpatrick looked great against them. So I think Ryan, he rebounded last week, threw for 2 touchdowns, and actually ran 2 win. You're not going to see that very often, but he'd run 2 touchdowns in. Matt is a top 12 start, but I wouldn't say he's probably in the top 10. It's important to note he struggled against the Saints last season. Matt Ryan did that, although that was later in the year when that Saints defense was, hitting on all cylinders. And so I think Matt is a fair play this week. I think another thing that helps is that Calvin Ridley's development is going to give him another option out there in the passing game. So you can start Matt and Brees. As far as running backs go, Devontae Freeman, Amon Scheffler reported from ESPN that Freeman's expected to miss 2 to 3 weeks. Another source came out and said he's going to miss a month, so it sounds like Freeman's going to be out this week, which is a huge boost to Tevin Coleman owners. We talked about he's one of the better handcuffs out there. Tevin Coleman, when he plays as an automatic running back one start, last week he had over 100 yards rushing. He's got good hands in the passing game. You need to start Tevin Coleman and Alvin Kamara. Do you need me to tell you to start this guy? He's been bottled up a little bit in the run. We actually said that that's going to happen. We expected a drop in his yards per carry, and that's exactly what's happening. But you know what? The guy's had 15 catches. He's so dangerous in the passing game, so it doesn't matter if they bottle him up in the run. This guy's a dangerous weapon. You got to start Alvin Kamara out there. As far as wide receivers go, Julio Jones got 233 yards first 2 games. He's a must start. Now, the one thing you have to know with Julio Jones is he's great in PPR leagues, but he has a hard time finding the red zone. Just has, or the end zone. And I think he's only had one time in his career he's had double-digit touchdowns. So this guy, once again, is great in PPR leagues, but in standard leagues, he's going to have a little lower value. But you got to start the guy. That's kind of a no-brainer. And then there's Calvin Ridley. Looked good last week, but it's only been 1 week. So I see he's a wide receiver 4. Until that volume is trustworthy, I wouldn't start him quite yet. But if you're real desperate play, not a bad start. Yeah, Michael Thomas. He's having an insane year so far. He's a wide receiver 1. Start him. Ted Ginn. I would start Ted Ginn. His role is going to continue to decrease as Traquan Smith understands the playbook. One of the concerns that they have had with him is having a hard time learning the playbook there. And Meredith is getting healthier. And so I think, Ted Ginn is going to be really unpredictable and hard to trust at this point. So he'll have an occasional game where he'll go out there and surprise you, but then all of a sudden there'll be that one game where he gets 2 catches for 20 yards. So I would probably advise sitting. As far as tight ends go, you got Hooper. He's a low-end tight end start. He's locked as number 1 tight end there, which is good, but his targets have been lower. They were low last year, they're lower again. So I think he's a guy that's a safe play, but he's got a much lower ceiling. And then there's Watson. I would sit Watson. Defenses, I would sit both defenses, and I would start Lutz and Bryant, both kickers, in this game. The Chiefs and the 49ers. Pat Mahomes, what do you say about this guy? 10 touchdown passes in 2 weeks. That's an NFL record. This offense is fun to watch. Yes, he's going to cool down. We know that's going to happen. But until that happens, until he cools down, he is a must start. This guy's got great weapons around him. Jimmy Garoppolo played a bad Detroit defense. Didn't have a great week. They didn't need to have a great week, though. They ran all over them. They were well out in front for quite a good portion of that game. I expect this game to be higher scoring, so I think that Jimmy Garoppolo is worth a flyer in deeper leagues, or if you're in leagues that require you to start 2 quarterbacks. He's not ranked in the top 12 to 15, but he's a safe play. Now you look at Philip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger versus them. They both had 424 yards passing and 452 yards passing, so definitely the Chiefs defense is susceptible. So Jimmy Graham is a decent play. He's not a great play, but he's a good play. Let's look at Kareem Hunt. I'd start as a running back 1. Trust me, this guy's going to be fine. I know some people are worried about his yards per carry, his involvement in the passing game. I think he's going to have a decrease in the passing game this year, but I think what's going to happen, though, is those running lanes are going to start to open up as Mahomes continues to be effective there. He's doing his best Aaron Rodgers imitation, and he actually ran hard last week, so I think Kareem Hunt's going to be just fine. You need to start him. There's Matt Breida. He exploded last week. I think he's a smaller back, which means a smaller workload. I think he'll get about 14 to 15 carries, 5 to 6 targets in the passing game, but he's a start as a running back too, especially in PPR leagues. He's going to have much greater value there. Alfred Morris will probably see 10 to 12 carries in the game, but he's touchdown dependent. You need to sit him in PPR leagues. He only has value in standards, and then it's only based on matchup play from week to week, unless Matt Breida were to go down. So at this point, I would probably lean towards sitting Morris. As far as the wide receiver in this game, Tyreek Hill, you got to start him. Obviously, he's a wide receiver 1. He's playing a lot like Steve Smith. Looks very similar size, speed, his game. This guy's really developed into a legitimately good wide receiver, so start him. Let's look at Sammy Watkins. Last week, he had 6 catches, 100 yards. Former first-round pick. Now, what's concerning is that the lower targets make him a risky play as a wide receiver 3. So he's a guy that you could start, but you can't trust there. So that's kind of what I would do. Then you got Garcon, Pettis, Goodwin, all the wide receivers for San Francisco at this point. The only guy that I would trust in that offense is Goodwin if he returns. And I would say there's maybe a 50-60% chance that he returns week 3. If so, I would start him as a wide receiver 3. But Garcon and Pettis, I would sit them. They're just not getting the targets of volume to be trustworthy. As far as tight ends go, George Kittle, I would start him. Then Travis Kelce, obviously, start. That's a no-brainer. Everybody's worried after week 1. Well, I think he showed owners last week that he's going to be just fine. And the defenses, I would sit both defenses. And I would start both kickers. Butker and Gould are good starts this week. Let's look at the Raiders and the Dolphins. Derek Carr rebounded well against a good Denver defense. Now he faced 2 tough defenses week 1. He had Denver and Denver and he had the Rams. Those are 2 very good defenses. But now he's going to get a little bit of break there as he's going to face the Dolphins. So I think that I would start him, but not as a top 12 guy. But I think when it's all said and done, Derek Carr's going to have a good year. Like I say, he looked sharp. He was very effective last game, very efficient. So I would start Derek Carr, but he was another guy that I would say is out of the top 12. I would say he's about between 12 to 15 range as far as quarterbacks go, depending upon your scoring system. Ryan Tannehill, he's looked fine. He's looked fine as a quarterback. He hasn't looked great. If you're in a very, very deep league, you could play him, but I prefer sitting at this point with this guy. I think he's more of a game manager, not asked to do a whole lot, doesn't have a ton of weapons there, but he's sufficient. Let's go to running backs. Got Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn Lynch is running, at times, looks like beast mode. He had one touchdown in week 1, looked great. He was run over runners, pushed the pile, I think 5 or 6 yards, looked great there. I think that he's a decent start in standard leagues. I think he's a scary start in PPR leagues because he's not actively involved in the passing game. And so depending upon what your league size is, what your scoring system is, he's a guy that you could, I kind of consider more as a running back 3. He's not a guy that I'd want to trust, but I wouldn't mind having him on my bench at this point of the year. So that was Richard, Martin, and Washington. Whenever he comes back, who knows what week that's going to be. I would sit all those guys. The problem is they devalue each other. They'll still carries from each other and targets from each other, especially when Washington comes back. Washington and Richard are very similar backs, size, skill set, things like that. Let's go to Kenyon Drake. I would start as a running back too. I think he looked better. He scored a touchdown. His yards per carry are up. When it's all said and done, Kenyon Drake is going to have a good year. Right now, what's keeping his value a little bit lower is Frank Gore. Frank Gore is actually playing well, but they're keeping his carries low. He's an older guy. He's 35 years old. Frank Gore is not going to be a guy that you're going to start unless Kenyon Drake were to go down at this point. So I would start Drake as a running back 2, and I would sit Frank Gore. As far as wide receivers go, Martavis Bryant was signed back with the team and looked decent, had some nice catches, but at this point, you just need to keep an eye on him. You're not going to start this guy. You need to see him get more carries there. Amari Cooper had a tough matchup, had a terrible week 1. I think he defied a lot of people, went out there and had 10 catches, 116 yards. I would start him as a wide receiver 2. Then Jordy Nelson, I would sit. It's just not surprising without Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball. This guy has lost a lot of value. He's older wide receiver at 33. He's coming off a knee surgery. Jordy Nelson, I know, had a good preseason, but right now it's just not translating into numbers in the regular season. Kenny Stills had an off week, but he's still the team's #1 wide receiver there. When it's all said and done, when the season's over, he's going to lead the team in touchdowns and yards. Mark my words on that. So I would start him as a wide receiver 3. And then Danny Amendola, he's a slot receiver at the low ceiling, but I would sit him. And then Parker, I would sit all their wide receivers in this game. As far as tight ends go, Jared Cook has been a guy that they've been looking to quite a bit in that offense. He's actually a very underrated tight end. I would start him. Sit all of Miami tight ends. And I would sit both defenses. I would start Nugent, but I would sit Sanders as far as kickers go in this game. So we'll talk about the Bills versus the Vikings. So Kirk Cousins, I'm just going to say start this guy. He's been worth every penny. I know a lot of people in Minnesota are upset that we passed up and moved on with Case Keenum, but I think it was worth it. Kirk Cousins has looked very good out there. Need to start him. Sounds like Josh Allen will get another start. You need to sit him. He's a rookie. There's no good weapons around him. The Bills simply look bad. He's in for a rude awakening playing in Minnesota. That crowd noise with that defense, it could be a very ugly game. They might get shut out. As far as running backs go, you need to sit Chris Ivory even if he plays. Now, there's a chance that McCoy might miss the game with cracked ribs. But even against that Minnesota front 7, that's very good, and that defense and all those factors, I would sit Chris Ivory. If McCoy plays, which is unlikely, I'm thinking he's got a fractured rib, I think they're going to want to give him 1 week off just to see how he responds, how he's doing. If he plays, he's a low-end running back 3 in very large leagues, but I think it's much better to look elsewhere if you can. One, the rib injury, the bad offense, you name it. There's so many things playing against him. So I would probably sit him until we can see how that rib is the week after. As far as Delvin Cook goes, I would start as a running back 2. He's looking quicker. He's very active in the passing game. 9 catches, 100 yards in 2 games. I like him. Now, he wasn't on the field for the final Minnesota drive in overtime. And a lot of people thought it was a hamstring injury. As it turns out, it was just dealing with cramps. He should be fine for this week. Monitor that, though, just to make sure. But looks like he'll be good to go. You need to start him. And Latavius Murray, I would sit him unless Cook can't go. If Dalvin Cook ends up sitting, if that turns out to be a hamstring injury, then you would start Latavius Murray as a running back 2 in standard leagues, a running back 3 in PPRs. As far as wide receivers go, you got Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, start both. I got a question for you. I did the best 1-2 wide receiver combination in the league. I think arguably you could make that argument. These guys are phenomenal. I love Thielen. I love Diggs. Start them. I would sit Bills wide receivers. I know Benjamin had a touchdown last week. For the year, he's got 2 catches for 19 yards. Now he faces Xavier Rhodes. Sit all Bills wide receivers. I would start Rudolph. Rudolph has kind of had a journeyman-like performance. He's not going to be great, but he's going to be sufficient. He's going to do what you need him to do. And I would sit Bills tight end. Start the Vikings defense, sit the Bills defense. The Vikings, praise God, signed Dan Bailey. I feel bad for Carlson. I hope that he finds a way, lands with another team. I hope he turns his career around, but it was killing me to watch him miss those field goals. So we cut him, signed Dan Bailey. Dan Bailey, from this point forward, every week will be a top 10 play in as a kicker goes. So play him and sit Steven Hauschka. So that's my take on that. Look at the Eagles versus the Colts. So Andrew Luck, I don't think he's quite back to his old self. At times looks a little bit rusty there. He's got 4 touchdown passes in 2 weeks, but he's also got 3 interceptions. And he's averaged 249 passing yards, which isn't great, but I think he's a guy that you need to start there. You look at Fitzpatrick, and the Bucs torched the Eagles last week, although I think that defense is going to be better. I think they're going to be fine, especially now that Carson Wentz is back. There's only so much you can ask a defense to do when that offense isn't moving the ball and the defense is on the field all the time, put in bad situations. So getting Carson Wentz back is actually going to help that Philadelphia defense. But I would start Andrew Luck. I think Andrew Luck's going to shape it around into shape. I think he's going to get sharper as the year goes on. I think that offense is going to be fine there. Another thing that bodes well for Andrew Luck owners is they don't run the ball very effectively, which is forcing them to have to throw a lot. Carson Wentz is back. He's going to play this week. He's going to be a little bit rusty, but against a bad Colts defense, I would start him. He's not top 10. I would say that he probably lands around 11 or 12 area, around that range of quarterbacks. Once again, a lot of these depend upon your scoring system. Do you have minus for interceptions, things like that? Once again, you need to contextualize that. But I would definitely start Carson Wentz. But he's not going to be the Carson Wentz last year. He was tracking to win his MVP. But give him a couple weeks. Running backs, Jay Ajayi, he left with a back injury. He did return. He had a touchdown. So you need to watch this injury this week and see how he does. Check the injury reports like Friday or Saturday. If he's fine, which it appears that he's going to, I would start as a running back too. He's got 3 touchdowns in 2 games. Those running lanes are going to be in to open up with Carson Wentz back there. Nick Foles really struggled, so that's going to help the entire offense, but it's really going to help Jay Ajayi and Corey Clement. So Corey Clement, what do you do with him? So if Jay Ajayi starts, Jay Ajayi is out because of an injury. I would say that Corey Clement is a automatic start as a running back too. If not, he's a running back 3 in deep leagues, and he could be a flex play. He's very good in the passing game. So that's my take on Corey Clement there. As far as Wilkins, Hines, Mack, the running backs for the Colts, I would really sit. I don't trust the volume for any one of them. If you have to start one, the guy that's looked the best so far is Wilkins. He had 10 carries, 61 yards, looked much better than Mack. Hines is good as a pass catching back. Maybe in very, very deep leagues, you could have him in as a flex play. If you're in a league that's maybe 14 teams or larger, he could be your flex play. But even then, I just don't think the volume is there. So I try to stay away from all those running backs unless you're absolutely desperate. So as wide receivers go, T.Y. Hilton. 2 touchdowns in 2 weeks. He is Luck's favorite target. He's a must start. I know owners are scared last year because of his inconsistency. Trust me, T.Y. Hilton is just fine. That wasn't him last year. That was the quarterback play. This guy is a guy that you need to play every week. T.Y. Hilton is very good. Nelson Aguilar, I would start as a wide receiver 2 with Jeffrey out. Looks like he's week to week, and it looks like he's most likely going to miss one more week there. And so you got Wallace is out. You got Jeffrey that's out. Nelson Aguilar just gobbling up targets. He had 22 targets in 2 weeks with 16 catches, so I would start Nelson Aguilar. All the other wide receivers in this game are just questionable. None of them get enough targets, enough on them. Nobody separated themselves from any other wide receivers to trust at this point, so I would sit them. As far as tight ends, Zach Ertz is going to take off now that Wentz is back. You need to start him. And then Doyle Ebron. Doyle's had more targets than Ebron. Ebron's had 2 touchdowns in 2 weeks. Had some really nice catches on those touchdowns, actually. But I'd really sit both until one of those goes down. They just bleed production from one another. It's hard to trust. So if you're really desperate, you can start one of them. But right now, it's hard that they devalue each other, like I had said. As far as defenses go, Philly, I think, is worth a start. I would sit Indianapolis. I would start Elliott, kicker, and Vinatieri. Both kickers are worth a start there. Let's go to the Packers and the Redskins there. Aaron Rodgers start. I don't need to even tell you why. I just started him. He's going to be just fine. He left the game. He didn't re-aggravate any injuries there. Alex Smith. I think it looks like his old self again. I think last year he really had a resurgence. He had a good year last year. I think he's a quality quarterback who's a game manager, but he's not a great fantasy option. I would sit unless you have no other options out there. As far as running backs go, I would sit all Packer running backs. I'll tell you what, at the beginning of the year we said this. We said Aaron Jones is going to win that starting job. We said Williams is not the answer there. When we predicted that, right now his yards per carry 3.6 for the year. It's just not cutting it. But we need to see Jones get a few touches. We need to make sure that he's going to get a majority of those carries before I would trust Aaron Jones. So I love Aaron Jones, but I'm going to love him more next week than I'm this week. And now because he's back, I think that devalues Williams. I wouldn't start any of those running backs there. Adrian Peterson came back down to earth. Now he's got 3.1 yards per carry in 2 games. We told you all that, you know what, he's going to be a serviceable running back, but don't get too excited. Last season against 2 weak rush defenses, Tampa Bay and San Francisco, he had 134 yards and 158 yards with a 4.65 yards per carry. The rest of the year, he had 182 yards in 8 games on 93 carries. That's a 1.96 yards per carry. You have to go all the way back to 2015 to find a season he had a yards per carry of over 4. You could start him as a running back 3, but Adrian Peterson just got a much lower ceiling than he has. I mean, this guy is a great running back, Hall of Famer, but he's at the end of his career, obviously. Chris Thompson, 19 catches and 155 yards and a TD in 2 games. I would start only in PPR leagues as a flex or running back 3, but Chris Thompson is a great weapon. He's probably their best receiver in that offense, even better than the wide receivers. He's their best weapon there. As far as wide receivers go, you had Devontae Adams. You got to start him, 152 yards and 2 TDs against 2 tough defenses. Now he gets some relief. Start him as a wide receiver 1. Cobb cooled off a little bit last year. Rodgers didn't throw as much. They were playing the Vikings, who have a very good defense. They were ahead. There's a lot of factors there, but Cobb is a wide receiver 3. Start him. He's in for a nice season this year. So a lot of people are overlooking Cobb. I would start him. Ellison is averaging 66 yards the last 2 games. He's decent, but he has a lower ceiling with Cobb and Adams ahead of him. It means you can't trust him as the number 3 guy out there simply because his volume's going to be up and down, his catches will be up and down. He might have a game where he explodes. But I think at this point, I'd rather sit him until we see a clear indication what his role is going to be there, unless one of the wide receivers were to go down and get injured. So I would sit Ellison. As far as Crowder, Doxson, and Richardson, none are worth starting at this point. Now, at some point, Crowder's going to pick up his production right now, but he hasn't looked good. But this is an offense that uses their tight ends and backs. The targets get spread out so evenly through all those wide receivers and tight ends and running backs that makes it hard to trust any of the wide receivers. If you have to start one, my money would be on Crowder. But I don't like any of those guys right now. As far as tight ends go, Jimmy Graham, Jordan Reed are must-starts. I would start both of those guys. I would sit both defenses. I would start Crosby, and I would sit Hopkins, the kicker. That's my take there. The Bengals and the Panthers. So Andy Dalton has looked good 2 weeks in a row. Last week against the Ravens, who have a good pass defense. Now in the second half, the Ravens actually kept him in check, but the first half he was out of control. And now they've got a new offensive line, not new offensive line, but they improved their offensive line, new offensive coordinator. Now last week, Matt Ryan torched the Panthers. So I'd say Andy Dalton's a top 20 start. I don't trust him enough to make him top 15, but I definitely trust him enough to he's moving up the rankings. And you just need to see one more week. But it would appear that there's a chance that Andy Dalton might be back to his 2015 form. And if he is, he'll become a very good play. I just need to see one more week there to know that for sure. Start Cam Newton. Obviously, as far as running backs go, Giovanni Bernard, he's starting for Mixon, has knee scoped. Bernard holds good value in any scoring system. Last year when he filled in for Mixon due to injuries, in 3 of the 4 games that he filled in for them, he had yards totals of 160, 130, 96. He's very good. This offense is better. The offensive line is better. You need to start Giovanni Bernard. He's going to be a great fill-in for a couple weeks. If you guys picked him up out there, great. If not, you need to pick him up. C.J. Anderson, I would sit him, and Christian McCaffrey, you need to start him out there. As far as wide receivers, A.J. Green, start him. Now, last week, I know it was a scary matchup. A lot of people wanted to sit him, and it made me scary. We bumped him down to wide receiver 2, but we said he's a guy that's just too talented to sit. One guy actually asked us an hour before the game, and we advised starting. I hope he started him. As we know, he went out and had 3 touchdowns. Once again, just too talented to sit. Tyler Boyd had a nice week. He's starting to settle into the number 2 wide receiver role on that offense. And so, but for me, I still see him as a wide receiver 4 in fantasy until he has more of a track record, until we can definitively say, hey, this is a guy that we can trust week in and week out. I like Boyd. I think you need to have him on your bench in a lot of leagues, but I wouldn't start him quite yet. Devin Funchess started as wide receiver 2. He had a nice game last week, 7 catches, 77 yards there. I think you're going to see that continue to improve, especially now that you have Olsen out at tight end. DJ Moore, sit him. Yeah, it was fun and exciting to watch his touchdown that he had, 51 yards, but he's only had 2 targets in 2 games, so you need to sit DJ Moore and you need to sit all wide receivers. Tight ends, I would sit all the tight ends in this game right now, especially you look at Cincinnati. Tyler Eifert is a guy that is intriguing, but right now they're spreading the targets among 3 tight ends there, so I would sit all those. You start the Panthers defense. They're kind of a low end, but not a great defensive play, but they're a decent play. I would sit the Bengals. As far as Bullock and Gano, they're good plays, but not spectacular. You could start both of those kickers. Look at the Titans versus the Jags. The Jags should win this game. I think the Jags look like they're a better team this year than they were last year. They look more complete, more balanced. But the Titans did find a way to beat them twice last year, so you never know what's going to happen there. Sometimes certain teams have their number. But I'll take that into account with some other factors we looked into this game. Marcus Mariota, it doesn't matter if he plays, if he doesn't play. I'm going to sit him. The Jags have a good defense. They slowed Tom Brady last week. We saw that. I would sit Blake Bortles. He had a nice game. And he's going to do that from time to time. Last year he did that, but his overall numbers weren't good. He's going to be asked to do less in this game against a punchless Titans offense. So I just don't think he'll need to do that much. So I would sit both quarterbacks. Leonard Fournette, I'd watch the injury report. If he plays, I would start with caution. You know, hamstring injuries are always a problem. You can re-aggravate that so easily, so it's concerning for me. I almost rather have, if you're a Leonard Fournette owner, it'd almost be better they sit him one more week just to make sure that he's good to go there. But if he does play, you need to start him as a running back 2. I'd call him a low-end running back 2. TJ Yeldon, I would only play if Leonard sits. And so you could play him as a running back 3 in standards or running back 2 in PPR if Leonard sits. Derrick Henry, 2.9 yards per carry for the year. A lot of people said this is his breakout year. If you watch our videos, we beat a dead horse. We gave you all sorts of analytics on why. We had some major red flags with him, and right now he is struggling. He's a guy that I would sit. There's so many red flags out there. So for me, he's a running back 4. As far as Deion Lewis go, I would start as a running back 3, a running back 2 in PPRs. He's been better. He's more versatile than Henry, and he's going to have a better year. He's going to be their back there when it's all said and done. As far as wide receiver, Corey Davis has got a lot of targets there. He's getting good volume, but he's going to see Ramsey this week. I would buy a sit. He's a wide receiver 4, and I would sit all the wide receivers for the Titans in this game. Keelan Cole, wow. Not only played well numbers-wise, but he made some really spectacular catches. He had a one-handed catch that I left Odell Beckham-like. He had a great week. If you look at 4 of last 6 regular season games, he's had 99 receiving yards or better. And so this is a guy that you need to start as a wide receiver 2. He's developing into, looks like this guy could become a bona fide star in the NFL. I like Keelan Cole there in this game. Then D.D. Westbrook. He's another young star in the making, but this week I call him a wide receiver 4 simply because I don't think they need to throw that much to win this game. And so that's going to bring down his value quite a bit. But D.D. Westbrook is another guy that I think needs to be owned, who's got a bright future in the NFL. Still tight ends in this game. As far as defenses go, start the Jags, obviously. The Titans defense is actually a good play in this one. Titans defense is underrated. You could play them. I would start Lambeau, the kicker, but I would sit Ryan Suckup. The Broncos and the Ravens. Case Keenum led a nice drive for a win down there. I know it's exciting, but before that, late in the fourth quarter there, he did a few things. He really struggled. He threw 3 interceptions in week 1. Currently in the year, he has more interceptions than touchdowns. Now he faces a Ravens defense that last season was a top 5 defense against the pass. I would sit Case Keenum. I think he's risky at this point. I know he's fun to watch. He reminds me a lot of Brett Favre. He's not afraid to step up. He's kind of a gunslinger there, but when it's all said and done in fantasy, I would set this guy. You got Joe Flacco. At over 300 yards passing per game. He's got 5 touchdowns. He's looked good after his job was in jeopardy heading into this preseason. He's a guy who's firmly grabbed hold of that job again, looks solid, but he's playing a defense that's got a good pass rush. And so I'd probably advise sitting Joe Flacco in this one. Unless it's a deep 2 quarterback league, I still wouldn't trust him against the Broncos defense. Although that front 7, Card and Wilson, made them look like they are beatable, but I think that defense, once again, you look at some really tough pass rush there. As far as running backs go, you got Philip Lindsay. I would start as a running back 2 in PPRs. I would lower in standards. Coach Joseph came out this week and said he's not considering starting Lindsay. We've been saying this for a while. He's a small back. He's 190 pounds. Freeman's about 35 pounds heavier. You can take the pounding. Rice Freeman's going to be the guy that, when it's all said, is going to get a majority of the carries there. But I think Lindsay's got huge value in the passing game. And so I would definitely start him as a running back 2 in PPRs, but lower him in standard leagues. As far as Royce Freeman goes, he did get a touchdown. I'm sure a lot of you are disappointed out there. They had to play catch-up in that game, so that's another reason why I think Freeman didn't get a lot of carries. They fell behind, so the speedier Lindsay, the guy that's more effective, has got better hands in the passing game, was used quite a bit. When the season's all said and done, I had mentioned this, I'm going to say it again, Freeman will have more carries than Lindsay. I would start Freeman as a running back 3 this week. That's where I kind of rank him at. The one thing about the Ravens, they got very good pass defense, but they can be beat on the ground, especially if linebacker Mosley is out. Now he's got a knee bruise there, and so watch that. If Mosley is in the game, that's going to help. If he's out, that's going to make that Ravens defense susceptible to the run. So we got Alan Collins. So in that game, didn't get a lot of carries. That's 2 weeks in a row that he has been great. Week 1, he did get a touchdown, but they fell behind 28-7. And so game flow really affected his touches and involvement in the game. So what they did is, because they fell behind so quickly in that game, they went to Javarius Allen. And the reason why they did, Javarius Allen is used quite a bit in their passing packages. And so that just devalued Alex Collins. What I think is encouraging, if I look at this game, Alex Collins has been running the ball a lot, hasn't been getting a lot of touches there. He had 3 catches for 55 yards. We know this is a guy that can run the ball effectively, so if he can be effective in the passing game, I think that just bodes well down the stretch there. I really like Alex Collins. I think he's going to rebound fine. He's a guy that I would start. And then Javarius Allen, I would only start in PPRs. Now he's had 10 catches in 2 games. His yards per carry have been brutal at 2.5 yards per carry. He's a guy that only has consideration in PPR leagues that are deeper. As far as wide receivers go, you get Demaryius Thomas. He's at a lower catch rate this year. He dropped a couple passes. That's concerning. But he's still Demaryius Thomas, and he's still got that pedigree. So what I would do is I would start him as a wide receiver 3 in this one. Hopefully he'll rebound. And then Emmanuel Sanders. Actually, Emmanuel Sanders has been the best wide receiver on this team. He's looking great. 231 receiving yards in 2 games. I would start as a wide receiver 3. He is in a tougher matchup, though. I understand that. And then you got Crabtree, Michael Crabtree in there. This is a guy that's touchdown dependent. He's only had 2 seasons over 1,000 yards receiving his entire career. So far this year, his yards totals have been lower. For me, he's a wide receiver 4. I'd prefer to sit him against Denver, unless you don't have anybody else out there that you can start. As far as Brown and Snead goes, these are guys that are getting more involved in the offense. Brown has actually looked really good, but the volumes targets aren't enough to depend on when you're facing a solid Denver defense. So for those guys, I see Brown as a wide receiver 4 and Snead as a wide receiver 5 this week. As far as tight ends go, Jake Butt is looking better and better each week, but you need to sit him. He's still not quite ready to be trusted as a starter. And then none of the Ravens tight ends, especially Andrews. I actually like Andrews. I think he's developed. I think he's going to continue to get better, but he's not someone you can trust. Start both defenses, and I would start both kickers, Tucker and McManus, in this one. So. Giants and the Texans. Eli Manning, that offensive line had problems last year protecting the quarterback. They made a lot of changes in the offseason, but it seems like those changes hasn't helped. The offensive line is a mess. Dallas had 6 sacks. They had a ton of pressure. Now you're going to have Watt there and some other guys. So I think until that offensive line improves, Eli Manning, that offense is going to be kind of a mess there, so I would sit him. Deshaun Watson, I would start him. I think he's a solid play, not great, but he's starting to find his groove a little bit. Now, it's funny because people are so big on this guy, and we actually went out and said he's not an elite quarterback. We had him out of our elite. We had him in our tier 2, not our tier 1. I think a lot of people were surprised. We said there's a learning curve in the NFL, and I think we're seeing that with him. Very good quarterback. It does help he gets Fuller back. That's a huge boost. So start Deshaun Watson, but he's not a top 5 quarterback. I know a lot of you drafted him very, very high. In fact, in most leagues, he was taken number 2 behind only Aaron Rodgers. As far as running backs go, Lamar Miller is a very good volume play. No competition right now. He is the go-to guy there, so he's a safe but not great play at a running back too. And then start Saquon Barkley. That guy's very talented. Every time he touches the ball, he is a threat to take it the distance. As far as wide receivers, Odell Beckham. Even with Eli struggling, you need to start him. I know last week he was quiet, but week 1, I think he had over 10 catches. So you got to start Odell Beckham. He's Odell Beckham. Somebody's going to make a mistake, and they're going to sit him because of Eli's struggles, and he's going to go out this week and have 180 yards and 2 TDs. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot. So start him. Sterling Shepard, I actually like him, but until that offense improves, you need to sit him. DeAndre Hopkins starts as a wide receiver 1, and Will Fuller start as a wide receiver 2. As far as tight ends go, Evan Ingram starts. I think you're going to see improved value. As long as the offensive line struggles, Evan Ingram actually is going to get better. I think what's going to happen is they're going to check the ball down. A lot of times you see tight ends being used frequently, especially when offensive line struggles. So I think Evan Ingram's value actually goes up with those O-line struggles. I would sit the Houston tight ends. I would sit both defenses. Houston looks good on paper, but it's another year. They were bad last year, and they look bad again this year. Kickers, Rosas, you could play in a deep play, and then Kai Farbarn, I would start. The Rams and the Chargers. Philip Rivers, start him. But don't expect what he did the first 2 weeks. He's playing a Rams defense that is very good. They give Bradford and Carr major issues there. So I would start Philip Rivers. I think he's a quality bet. I think he'll move the ball. I think he'll have a decent day. But this Rams defense is no joke. So you need to start him as a lower-end quarterback. Jared Goff. The Chargers missing Joey Bosa. And it sounds like he's going to be at least 1 more week. That defense really misses him there. They're just not quite the same without him. Another thing that hurts Jared Goff in this offense is Todd Gurley near the goal line, but he has so many good wide receivers that you need to start Jared Goff. He's a quality quarterback out there. He's a good play. Running backs go Todd Gurley, start him. I don't even need to say anything. Just got to start that guy, obviously. Melvin Gordon. The team said in the offseason that they're working, and he's continuing to improve in the passing game, and it shows. You need to start this guy. In 2 games, he got 15 catches, 140 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. I'm including what he's done running the ball. Gordon is only second behind Kamara in PPR scoring for running backs right now. This guy's having a huge year. I would sit Austin Eckler. I think he's a great backup and a handcuff, but he's playing a Rams defense that is solid, so I would sit Eckler this week. As far as wide receivers go, Mike Williams, last week he only had 2 catches, but was only on 2 targets. He had a beautiful touchdown, and I think it was game flow that really affected and hurt his overall numbers last week. They were up 28-3. They didn't have to throw the ball a lot in the second half. And we actually talked about that last week. We said Phillips is in a great matchup. Sorry, not Phillips. Philip Rivers had a great matchup, but the one concern that we had was this could be another blowout where they don't need to throw the ball a lot, and that's exactly what happened in that game. I actually like Mike Williams. He's a former first-round pick. He's very talented. He's a big, athletic receiver. I would start him as a wide receiver 3 in deep leagues. Keenan Allen, start. obviously, in this one. Now, the one thing you need to do is you need to start him. Now, Aqib Talib is going to make it a little bit harder on him, make life a little more difficult, but I think you still need to start him. He's the go-to guy for Philip Rivers. As far as the wide receivers go for the Rams, that one is tough because you look at Woods, Cooks, Cooper Kupp. I like all of them, and they're getting nice, even distribution of targets there in the game. What honestly would be the best thing for one of those receivers if one of them were to go down? I don't want to see anybody get hurt in the NFL. I'm not saying that, but ultimately that's what would increase their value. All three of those wide receivers lined as a wide receiver 3. And I know Cooks had a good game last week, but once again, week 1, it's going to fluctuate like that. Week 1, Cooper Kupp got found in the end zone. So between all three of those guys, their target distribution, that offense, Todd Gurley, they're all very good, but they fall as wide receiver 3s. I wouldn't trust either one or none of them as a wide receiver 1 or 2. I would sit all tight ends. None have distinguished themselves. Start the Rams defense. I would start the Chargers, but you need to lower your expectation with Bosa out. It'd probably be better actually to sit the Chargers at this point until Joey Bosa comes back, especially against this Rams team. As far as kickers go, the Rams brought in a kicker. You look at Zerline is going to be out for a while there. And you know what happens? We learned from the Vikings and Carlson. It's a cautionary tale to avoid unproven kickers. So even though that Rams offense is very good, I would not start their kicker they signed just because I just want to see how he does. Sturgis is a low-end start as far as the Chargers go, their kicker. The Bears and the Cards, Mitch Trubisky. He threw 2 touchdowns last night, but he also had 2 picks. He's only averaging 185 passing yards, so I think he's got a ways to go before you can trust him as a guy that you can start there. The Cards are bad, but I think this is going to be a low-scoring game. I think that Bears defense is going to give the Cards all sorts of problems on that field. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I don't think Mitch Trubisky is going to need to throw the ball a lot. I think the Bears are going to run away with this one. Rosen, Sam, doesn't matter who starts at quarterback for the Cards. You need to sit them all. This Bears defense is very good. They're going to be top 5 when it's all said and done. Last week, the Cardinals only made it past the 50-yard line 1 time. And so I would start Howard. He should have a better week this week, and he's also shown better hands in the passing game. He's worked hard in the offseason. He's got 8 catches in 2 games. Last year, he only had 23 the entire season. I would sit Tariq Cohen, and I would start David Johnson. Now, David Johnson you have to view as a running back, too, until that offense starts going, but he's too talented to sit there. As far as wide receivers go, can't believe I'm going to say this, but Larry Fitzgerald needs to sit him. He's got a hamstring issue, quarterback struggles. He's a wide receiver 4 in PPR leagues until things get better there. I would sit all others. Start Allen Robinson. He's starting to look like his old self. He had 10 catches, 83 yards last night. He's had 21 targets in 2 games. He's a wide receiver 3 facing Patrick Peterson though this week, but you need to start him. I would sit all other Bears wide receivers. Start Trey Burton at tight end. I would sit all other tight ends in this game. As defenses go, I would sit the Cards, start the Bears defense in a great matchup this week. If you own the Bears defense, you got to be excited. I would sit the Cards kicker, but I'd start Parquet for the Bears. Cowboys versus the Seahawks. Dak Prescott looked better last week, but not good enough to start quite yet. He needs some wide receivers to step up on that offense, so I would sit him. Russell Wilson, start. He's good, and he gets a break after facing the Denvers, and the Bears defense are very good. Now he gets to go home, and so I think that he's going to have a good week there. As far as running backs go, you got Penny and Carlson. I would sit both of those. Carlson's been the better runner, but after falling behind, they use Penny, who is supposed to be better in the passing game. They split touches, they devalue each other, and so at this point, I would sit both backs. I would start Ezekiel Elliott. Obviously, he's a running back 1. As far as wide receivers go, I would sit all Dallas wide receivers. I know Austin scored, but he's only had 2 targets in 2 games. None of those Dallas wide receivers have distinguished themselves or become trustworthy. Tyler Lockett, 60 yards and touchdown in back-to-back weeks. He's a wide receiver 3 with Baldwin out. And then there's Brandon Marshall. I would say to him he's wide receiver 4 or 5. And then as far as tight ends go, you start Will Disley. He was used again. He's got 10 targets in 2 games and 2 touchdowns. Appears to be this not a fluke. Sounds like he's going to be their guy there. So I think Will Disley is worth a start there. Now the tight ends for Dallas we're starting. As far as defense go, I personally sit both. Dallas is the best of the 2. And you could start both kickers. They're fine, but not great starts there. The Patriots versus the Lions. Start Tom Brady. It's Tom Brady. And I would start Matthew Stafford there. That Lions defense is terrible, which means Matthew Stafford has to throw a ton just to keep them in the game, so that bodes well. He's going to have a huge volume play throughout the year. LeGarrette Blount ran well last game. Was getting better and better. Got ejected for standing for his quarterback. I would sit him in PPR leagues, but in standards, I would say Blount is a running back 3. As far as Johnson goes, Kerryon Johnson sit in standards, but in PPRs, He's a running back 4. He's still a few weeks away from having fantasy relevance, but I think he's going to get there, just not this week. Sonny Michel saw action, looked okay. I would really sit him. There's just too many options. They spread the ball around too much. I look at Rex Burkett. Has been effective running the ball. They went away from him last game a little bit, so I think that just is concerning. The one guy, as far as running back said, that I would trust is James White. 7 catches, 73 yards. I would start as a running back 2 or flex play in PPRs. He's very solid in PPR scoring leagues. Very low value in standards. As far as wide receivers go, Chris Hogan last week. Week 1 was Dorsart. Last week it was Hogan, but he only had 5 targets and 3 catches. With that said, the Lions defense is bad, so I think you need to start Hogan as a wide receiver 3. Now, I know we're excited about Josh Gordon. I'm excited to see what he's going to do with Tom Brady. I think about back when Randy Moss was there and all that. But I think we need to give him time to get there, to learn the playbook. I'm not going to start him this week. Okay, I think it's a risky start. As far as tight ends go, I would sit the Lions tight ends, start Gronkowski. As you know, that's a no-brainer. Sit both defenses. I would start Gostkowski and Prater. Steelers versus the Bucs. This is going to be a fun game to watch. Going to be a lot of points scored here. This Pittsburgh Steelers defense is bad. In the last 9 games, they're allowing 27.3 points per game, and the Bucs defense is as bad as theirs. So this is a shootout in the making. You need to start Ben Roethlisberger, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Start both of those quarterbacks in this game. I would start Connor in this game, running back. He got shut down a little bit in the run there, but he's so effective in the passing game that doesn't matter. He's going to be a great start. I would sit Peyton Barber in this one. I would start Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju Smith-Schuster actually, for me, lands as a wide receiver 1 at this point. He's just as good as Brown currently. And so start both those guys. I would start Evans as wide receiver 1. Now, Godwin and Jackson start as wide receiver 3s. They're another example of devaluing each other because they steal targets there. You can start Jesse James. He's not a top 10 tight end, but it looks like he's going to be their guy this year. And then O.J. Howard, his targets are lower, so he's going to run hot or cold this year, but he's talented enough that you need to start. Last week he had a good game. Defense, sit both. They're brutal. Start both kickers in this one. So thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions, concerns, feel free to put at the bottom. We'll do our best to answer questions for you, give you in-depth answers. So thanks again, and God bless. Thanks for joining us.